Sangye chudak soki chok nam la jang chu badu dagni kyap su chi dagi jin soki be sonam ki dola penchir sangye dru parshu. Sangye chudak soki chok nam la jang chu badu dagni kyap su chi dagi chun yengi be sonam ki dola penchir sangye dru parshu. Sangye chudang soki chok nam la jang chu badu dagni gyap suchi dagi chun yengi pe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupar shon.
Okay, good morning. Let's just start with a couple of minutes meditation on the breath, just to clear our minds, let worldly thoughts subside. So now we get ourselves into an extremely virtuous frame of mind by generating bodhicitta, in motivation for this morning's session. So think, the purpose of my life is to lead all sentient beings from suffering to enlightenment. In order to do that, first I have to reach enlightenment myself. And that depends upon completing the path to enlightenment, the graduated path to enlightenment, and realizing all the hundreds and thousands of steps of the path. So that can only happen by knowing what they are and thinking about them, getting clear intellectual understanding, and then meditating on each of these steps in order to gain realization of them. Therefore, in order to do that, I'm going to study Atisha's seminal lamrim, Stages of the Path text, Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, referring to commentaries by Khunu Lama Rinpoche, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Geshe Sonam Rinchen. So, that's what we're doing this morning in order to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. I'll drink to that. Okay, so just before we forge ahead, just forge back to last week, Jennifer asked a question about name and form. So if name and form, mind and body, which is the fourth of the 12 links, contains the 51 mental factors or secondary minds, then why a couple of them singled out, mentioned later on, feeling, craving and grasping? Is that right? Was that the question?
Actually, yes.
So just on that point, I actually didn't find an answer in the text, perhaps because I didn't look carefully enough, but name and form, or mind and body. Mind there contains the 6 principal consciousnesses and the 51 mental factors or secondary minds. So those in that stage, at the fourth link, these are sort of potentials rather than fully manifested. For example, if we look at I'm just looking at Venerable Gyatso's book, The World and Ourselves. It's a free book. We are actually getting hard copies. It was recently reprinted in Singapore, and they're sending us a bunch. So if anybody wants the actual book, let me know. Otherwise, it's online. You can read it online at lamayeshe.com. And amongst other things, what he does here is he talks about the 51 mental factors. So if we just quickly remember what they are, the 5 ever-present mental factors: intention, mental engagement, contact, feeling. So those are contact and feeling, which lead to craving and grasping. They're 5 of the ever-present. Those 5 factors are present in every moment of mind. Then there's the 5 focusing or object ascertaining mental factors: aspiration, conviction, mindfulness, concentration, and knowledge. So, we're not going to say that an embryo has those to any developed extent, conviction, mindfulness, concentration, and knowledge. So then there are 11 virtuous mental factors: faith, self-respect, consideration, non-attachment, non-anger, non-confusion, enthusiasm, pliancy, conscientiousness, equanimity, non-harmfulness. I wouldn't say those are developed in, those are present in any developed form in an embryo or a developing fetus. Then there are then there are the 6 root afflictions: attachment, anger, ignorance, pride, doubt, and afflicted views. So afflicted views are sort of beliefs, philosophical beliefs, which are incorrect, but, we're not going to say an embryo has those. And there are 20 secondary delusions. I'm not going to run through them. And then there are 4 changeable mental factors. So those are all, they're in many places in Jeffrey Hopkins' book. There are mind and in Tibetan Buddhism. There are a lot of books that deal with this, and it's in the basic program. Geshe-la must have taught it a couple of times. Geshe Tsulga taught it a couple of times. Low Rig, mind and mental factors. So, there's plenty of reference material if you don't remember them all from those previous teachings. But so when we come to the links of craving and grasping, Was it craving and grasping you were talking about, Jen, or
No, I actually was just
contact and feeling?
the projected effects. So that would have been contact and feeling. So
Right.
it would appear to be a redundancy, but I, to my ignorant mind.
No, not at all. But so I think it's just in the first instance, name and form, they're just potentials, you know, and then when when they develop further, then contact and feeling are able to arise. I think that's all it's saying.
Yeah, I did a little reading in Geshe Sopa's book on karma, and to confirm your original answer about them being the potentials, because of course, if you don't have the 6 sense spheres, you don't have the conditions to actually generate contact and feeling. So
yeah, and so that the fifth link there, that 6 sense bases, is depicted as a house with empty windows, which shows that again, there's potential there, but there's not an object yet. So in order to have contact and feeling, you need these 3 things. You need the object, an intact sense organ, and the appropriate sense consciousness. Anyway, something like that. Okay, so
thank you very much.
You're welcome. So we look at the 5th verse. So the 5th verse of Lamp for the Path says, those who through their personal suffering truly want to end completely all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacity. So now we're talking about the path of the practitioner of greatest capacity, or great capable being, as Rinpoche calls it, the Mahayana practitioner. So Khunu Lama's commentary on this text was quite short. It was just maybe a 1-hour teaching. So so what he said here is, who then are the beings of higher capability? They are those who, having understood their own suffering, take it as an example of the suffering that other beings are also experiencing, and generate the great wish of wanting to put an end to the suffering of all sentient beings. That's pretty much what the verse says. In terms of studying teachings on bodhicitta and the bodhisattva path, in the last couple of years, Wisdom have published some books by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. There's this one, or Bodhicitta. So, you know, quite a lengthy volume. So based on Rinpoche's teachings over the last 40 years. So it talks about bodhicitta being the gateway to the Mahayana, and the benefits, and how to develop bodhicitta, 7-point cause and effect, equalizing, exchanging self and others, and then some meditations on bodhicitta. So this is a great book to know more about bodhicitta. And then further than that, you know, as I mentioned, entering sort of aspirational and engaging bodhicitta. Maybe I mentioned it in the Guru Puja the other day. Anyway, so there's Rinpoche's book on the 6 perfections. So these are the actual practices of a bodhisattva, the main practices of a bodhisattva, you know, generosity, morality, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom. And then Rinpoche's taught a lot on on the third perfection, on patience. So as the antidote to anger, so there's a whole book on patience. And, you know, if anger is your main delusion, then that's the first one you have to work on to subdue. So the practice of patience is how we do that. So just giving a plug for those recent wisdom books. So then turning to His Holiness's commentary on, you know, from Illuminating the Path, on the 5th verse. His Holiness says, this verse refers to those practitioners who generate compassion and loving kindness towards others on the basis of a deep understanding of the nature of their own suffering. So even to develop renunciation, you know, even to become a practitioner of the first of the 3 levels, the path of the being of least capacity, we have to understand suffering, you know, and our suffering not just in this life, but really the depth and breadth of the suffering we've experienced in all 6 realms since beginningless time. So, you know, and that's the first thing the Buddha taught. In the 4 Noble Truths, the first is the truth of suffering. So when we understand our own suffering deeply, then we can understand what others are going through, and that in that way generate compassion, and then develop our wish not just to free ourselves from suffering, but all sentient beings. So such practitioners, they understand that suffering comes into being as a result of the mental afflictions rooted in fundamental ignorance, and recognize that as long as they're under the control of these afflictions and the underlying ignorance, sufferings will continue to rise ceaselessly like ripples on a lake. Once you understand the nature of suffering in relation to your own existence in this way, you can extend your understanding to see that all sentient beings suffer from bondage by the afflictions. So we understand how that bondage works by having looked at the 12 links that, you know, constantly bind us tighter and tighter to the wheel of life. Reflecting on their suffering, you then cultivate the insight that just as you yourself want to be free from suffering, so do they. This is how you begin to cultivate great compassion. When you generate the wish for all sentient beings to be happy, this is the start of loving kindness. So remember, you know, true love is wishing for others to be happy, you know, wishing for seeing their happiness is more important than our own. And compassion is wanting others to be free from suffering, seeing again that their freedom from suffering is more important than our own. That's great compassion that leads to bodhicitta. On the basis of compassion, wishing others to be free of suffering, and loving kindness, wishing others to be happy, you then generate a sense of special responsibility. Your compassion does not remain simply at the level of a wish or aspiration. You generate a sense of commitment. I myself shall liberate all beings from suffering. Eventually, this extraordinary sense of responsibility leads to the realization of bodhicitta, the altruistic intention of one who aspires to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So, I mean, just to know about this is so amazing. You know, think how many people, this 7 billion people on Earth, however many it is, how few understand this. Thus, there are two kinds of aspiration in the realization of bodhicitta. The aspiration concerned for the welfare of all sentient beings, and the aspiration to attain Buddhahood for their state. The spontaneous intention to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings occurs when these two aspirations are complete. This is the realization of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. At this point, the student has become a practitioner of highest capacity, and all activities and practices motivated by bodhicitta are those of the great vehicle, the Mahayana. So then, to elaborate on that a little, His Holiness quotes Lama Tsongkhapa from Lines of Experience, as he does throughout this teaching. I mean, he's combining commentaries on these two texts. So Lama Tsongkhapa said, ever enhancing your enlightened motive of bodhicitta is the central axle of the Mahayana path. It is the basis and foundation for great waves of enlightening conduct. Like a gold-making elixir, it turns everything you do into the two collections, building up a treasure of merit gathered from infinitely collected virtues. Knowing this, bodhisattvas hold this supreme precious mind as their innermost practice. I, the yogi, have practiced just that. You who also seek liberation, please cultivate yourself in the same way. So, Lama Tsongkhapa is encouraging us to practice bodhicitta in the way that he did and achieved the ultimate result. The first sentence describes bodhicitta as the central axle of the Mahayana path. Bodhicitta is a truly courageous and remarkable sentiment and the basis of the entire bodhisattva practice. The terms basis and foundation in the next sentence mean that the moment you've realized bodhicitta, you've become a Mahayana practitioner and are on the path to complete enlightenment. But the moment your bodhicitta degenerates, you fall outside the fold of the bodhisattvas. Without bodhicitta, no matter how advanced you are in other practices, even if you have direct realization of emptiness or have attained nirvana, nothing you do becomes the conduct of a bodhisattva or the cause of enlightenment. The third sentence refers to an elixir that transforms base metals into gold. This means that with bodhicitta, even a seemingly insignificant act of virtue, such as giving food to an ant, is transformed into a condition for attaining full enlightenment. It then mentions infinitely connected virtues, which indicates the expansiveness of this altruistic intention. Bodhicitta is a mind concerned with the welfare of infinite sentient beings. It enables us to commit to working for their benefit for infinite eons and motivates us to engage in an infinite variety of skillful means to help them. Thus, bodhisattvas are referred to as enlightened heroes or warriors. They are highly altruistic beings who have the wisdom to realize that by dedicating themselves to the welfare of other sentient beings, the fulfillment of their own self-interest comes automatically as a byproduct. They are also heroic in the sense that they've dedicated their lives to attaining total transcendence and victory over the four obstructive forces. The verse concludes, knowing this, bodhisattvas hold this supreme precious mind as their innermost practice. I, the yogi, have practiced just that. You who also seek liberation, please cultivate yourself in the same way. So that's His Holiness's little commentary on that verse. And then slightly more extensive commentary from Geshe Sonam Rinchen. So again, the verse reads, those who through their personal suffering truly want to end completely all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacity. Thorough experience in the practices of the initial and intermediate levels is essential as a foundation for the practices of persons of great capacity. And with such experience, we recognize the full extent and intensity of suffering within cyclic existence. We also realize that we have had bodies of every kind in the countless rebirths we've taken. During these rebirths, living beings without number have been our parents. Indeed, there isn't a single one we can point to and say with certainty, this one has never been my mother. We begin to see them not just as our mothers, but as immensely kind mothers who are drowning in an ocean of suffering. Without respite, they experience the suffering of pain, of change, and the pervasive suffering of conditioning. Full understanding of our own suffering enables us to experience profound empathy and compassion for them. A strong wish arises to free them completely from suffering and all its causes in such a way that they will never suffer again. But when we ask ourselves whether in fact we can do this, we realize that we are now powerless at present. Only an enlightened being can help them in the most effective way. Unable to bear others' suffering, we wish intensely to relieve every form of it and give them every kind of happiness. But wishing is not enough. To accomplish their well-being, we must fulfill our own potential by becoming enlightened. For this purpose, we train in various ways, combining and perfecting skillful means and wisdom. By contemplating the afflicted aspect of the 12-part process through which we remain ensnared in cyclic existence, which we did last week, we develop an urgent wish to escape. Meditation on the 12 links of dependent arising and on the Four Noble Truths which subsume them can lead us to personal liberation. Even if we attain liberation from cyclic existence by following the paths of a hero or solitary realizer, we have not yet completely fulfilled our true potential. Although we've put an end to the disturbing emotions which obstruct liberation, their imprints which obstruct knowledge to all phenomena still remain. So remember, there are these two obscurations, gross and subtle. So the gross obscurations, just the regular delusions based on self-grasping ignorance, are what keep us in cyclic existence. And their imprints on the consciousness, are what prevent us from reaching enlightenment. So those we gradually eliminate through our bodhisattva practice. The imprints which obstruct knowledge of all phenomena still remain. To overcome all remaining limitations, we must eventually arise from the blissful state of personal peace and begin the practices of the great vehicle. Chandra Goman says that the true task of a person of great capacity is not simply to pursue happiness and avoid suffering in this life. So Chandra Goman, there's a bit of a footnote to understand who he is. He was a contemporary of Chandrakirti, so, 7th century or so, and highly respected as a scholar and author of many works on the major fields of knowledge, such as medicine, poetry, grammar, and the crafts. So he also wrote a famous book on the Bodhisattva vow. So this is a commentary also by Geshe Sonam Rinchen, whose commentary we're reading here on Lamp for the Path. So, you know, those of us who've taken bodhisattva vows would be well served by studying this in-depth teaching on the bodhisattva vows, published by Snowline or Shambhala now. So Geshe Sonam Rinchen, translated by Ruth Sonam, who's an English woman, who lived in Dharamsala since the early to mid-70s. They've put many important books together, such as The Lamp for the Path, and this one, and Three Principal Aspects of the Path, and I've forgotten, but a bunch of other ones, a few other ones. So Geshe Sonam Rinchen was the Geshe who took over teaching at the Tibetan Library from Geshe Ngaon Dage when Gen Rinpoche moved to New Zealand, I think in the 80s, I guess. I can't remember exactly. So Geshe Ngaon Dage was the first teacher of the Tibetan Library from about 1970. So Chandra Goman, he and Chandrakirti debated for 7 years at Nalanda, during which Chandra Goman upheld the Svatantrika Madhyamika view, while Chandrakirti took the Prasangika standpoint. Chandra Goman was particularly devoted to Avalokiteshvara and Tara. Once an old woman who was very poor and whose daughter was to be married came to Chandrakirti in Nalanda, having heard that he had wealth, and begged him for some jewels. Chandrakirti pointed out that he was a fully ordained monk, and whatever he had belonged to the spiritual community. But he pointed out where Chandra Goman lived nearby, saying that as he was a layman, he would perhaps be able to help. Chandra Goman, however, lived very simply and had nothing but his clothes and his books. Distressed that he could not provide what she wanted, he prayed to a painting of Tara on his wall. Tara suddenly came to life, took off her jewels, and gave them to Chandra Goman for the old woman's daughter. Afterwards, this picture of Tara was known as the Tara without jewels. You know, there's all these stories. Sometimes you wonder, do they really happen like that? Or is it some kind of allegory? And yeah, I'd like to see that. But I think you have to have a pretty pure view, maybe to see Tara take off her jewels and give them away. Chandra Goman's definition of a practitioner of great capacity is found in his letter to a disciple. And that has been translated. Somebody look it up. Chandra Goman, letter to a disciple. Addressed to a monk who wished to enter into a relationship with a princess. In this letter of advice, Chandra Goman reminds him of the reasons for safeguarding his precepts of training, the benefits derived from this, and the disadvantages of not doing so. Okay, so that's a little about Chandra Goman and his teaching on the Bodhisattva vow. So then he says, so then Geshe Sonam Rinpoche says, if you put a pile of grass and some nice clean water in front of a cow, it will drink and eat its fill. A cow's concern is for immediate comfort and happiness. What is a great being like? The sun and moon dispel darkness without considering it burdensome. The earth willingly supports everything on it. Great beings willingly and joyfully accept the responsibility of alleviating the suffering of all beings and bringing them to happiness. You know, if we want to become like them, we must train ourselves in the altruistic intention. You know, instead of thinking others are kind of a nuisance and a hassle, you know, as I do. It is compassion to think, wouldn't it be wonderful if all living beings were free from suffering? May they be free from suffering. And it's loving to think, wouldn't it be wonderful if they were all happy? May they be happy. A great being goes further and thinks, may I free them from suffering? May I give them happiness? These special forms of compassion and love mark the awakening of the Mahayana disposition. The combination of these two thoughts is called the special wish. This wish will not arise unless we've developed a strong impetus to extricate ourselves from cyclic existence as a result of fully recognizing our own condition, since only through this can we empathize completely with others. The great vehicle comprises the causal perfection vehicle and the resultant secret mantra vehicle. So I think you know the difference, right? The causal vehicle, the resultant vehicle. With the causal vehicle, the paramitayana, we practice the cause, you know, mainly these, you know, 6 perfections. We practice 6 perfections eventually to get the result. So, you know, that can take a long time, like 3 countless great eons. That was the path Shakyamuni Buddha followed. So, and as a result, we have all this 550 or whatever it is, the Jataka tales, the previous lives of the Buddha as a bodhisattva, doing all these different things in different aspects, you know, gradually practicing these 6 bodhisattva activities until they became actual perfections. So, you know, as it says, that's okay as far as it goes. That's wonderful as far as it goes. But for those who can't bear to think that it's going to be 3 countless great eons before they can actually be enlightened and really help all sentient beings, those who look for a quicker path and are in the right place at the right time, such as now, when the tantric teachings exist, and have the capacity to engage in the much more difficult practice of Tantra, then they can follow the Vajrayana path, the resultant vehicle. So there, in order to practice that, we need empowerment or initiation into certain meditational deities like Tara or Manjushri or Chenrezig, or you know, so many different deities. We need empowerment or you know, permission from a qualified Lama to engage in those practices. So then the Lama gives us initiation, and then we're allowed to practice the sadhana or the method of accomplishment. And in order to be able to do that properly, we get tantric commentaries and tantric vows. Well, often, you know, they're usually part of the initiation. So so what that enables us to do is to visualize ourselves through going through this method of accomplishment. We get to a point where we you know, dissolve into emptiness, and out of emptiness arises the deity as an enlightened being. So that's the result. So that's taking the result as the path. I forget what the Tibetan is. It's taking the result as the path. So we bring our future enlightenment into the present and sort of pretend we're enlightened. So we see ourselves and other beings as deities, and the world, our surroundings as a mandala, not just as an ordinary place. And all sounds we hear are mantra. So, the spirit of the pratimoksha vows of individual liberation, is to not create negative karma. And the spirit of the bodhisattva vows is to counteract self-cherishing. And the spirit of the tantric vows is to counteract the dualistic view, seeing things as existing from their own side, seeing things as inherently existent. So like Atisha said, he never broke his pratimoksha vows, and he rarely broke his bodhisattva vows, because for him, it was very easy not to create negative karma, and pretty easy not to allow his self-cherishing mind to arise. But he said his tantric vows, he would break them like rain falling. It was so hard to maintain a pure view, and I think that's what they say about bodhisattvas when they meditate when they're in deep concentration on emptiness. They have no dualistic view at all in meditation, but when they come out of the session, because of their imprints, the shedip, the obscurations to knowledge, they automatically see the world as existing from its own side. So as you go through the 8th, 9th, 10th levels, gradually that apparently gets less and less. But so that's why Atisha said he broke his tantric vows, the spirit of which is not to have a dualistic view. He broke his tantric vows like rain falling. So that's why you see Atisha like the statue at the center or in the paintings. He has a little stupa always has a little stupa by his side. So that was whenever he was traveling, he always traveled with this stupa. And wherever he noticed he'd broken, presumably a tantric vow, he would stop everything and jump off his horse and put his stupa on a rock, some higher place, and do 3 prostrations and immediately purify that broken precept. So, it'd be nice to be that aware, but I think we've got a bit of a way to go there. But anyway, that was Atisha. So the resultant vehicle is taking the result as the path. We ourselves must be Mahayana practitioners. It isn't enough, however, that the practices we do are Mahayana practices, whether they're perfection vehicle or secret mantra vehicle. We ourselves must be Mahayana practitioners. Lama Yeshe used to laugh and say, we call ourselves Mahayanists, but if we really look at our mind, we can't even call ourselves Hinayanists. We don't practice pure morality. We don't engage in 3 higher trainings: conduct, concentration, wisdom. So if we're not even Hinayanists, how can we dare to call ourselves Mahayanists? but we ourselves must be Mahayana practitioners. Concerning the view of reality, the Madhyamaka and Chittamantran philosophical systems are Mahayana schools of philosophical tenets, but the distinction, so the footnote here from Geshe Sonam Rinchen is the distinction between Mahayana and Hinayana tenets is made on the basis of philosophical view. So a proponent of Mahayana tenets is not necessarily a practitioner of the great vehicle. However, the selflessness of phenomena is presented as the main object of meditation for the Mahayana practitioners who are intent on the attainment of complete enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. This depends on ridding themselves of the obstructions to knowledge of all phenomena, these imprints, Shedip, Nyavarana, only possible through understanding the selflessness of phenomena. For proponents of Prasangika Madhyamaka view, there is no difference in subtlety between the selflessness of persons and of other phenomena, whereas other schools which accept the selflessness of phenomena consider such selflessness more subtle. So Geshe has taught tenets, hasn't he? Dupta, probably a couple of times.
Actually, he was just beginning. He had done the first class right before the accident.
Oh, really? Okay, well, that's something to look forward to. I think he's done it before, though. So Geshe Tsulga taught it once or twice, too. Anyway, the distinction between Mahayana and other practitioners is made not on the basis of philosophical views, but on the basis of attitude and conduct. So we can hold the Mahayana philosophical view without being a Mahayanist. If we're not actually practicing compassion and loving kindness, then we're not really Mahayana practitioners. For this reason, Atisha places great emphasis on the altruistic intention, bodhicitta, and devotes most of this text describing the ritual by which we make the formal commitment to attain enlightenment for the sake of all living beings, the training which follows, and its result. Ideally, we approach study and practice of the great vehicle with the altruistic intention itself, but since this is not easy to develop, we need at least to appreciate how sublime it is and feel inspired by it. Even though it doesn't arise naturally in us at present, we can arouse it repeatedly. The altruistic, they're calling bodhicitta here the altruistic intention. Having done so, any positive action we undertake, positive actions we undertake become Mahayana practices. Our intention makes an enormous qualitative difference. We may do something quite unremarkable and ordinary. It may even appear frivolous, but if the kind-hearted wish to help all living beings is present, it is a practice of a bodhisattva. On the other hand, we may engage in what appears to be spiritual practice, but without the right kind of motivation, it's nothing more than a worldly activity. So you remember the story that the Lamas always tell about Dom Tomba. He was Atisha's assistant and main disciple, interpreter, founder of the Kadampa tradition, Dom Tomba. He was a layman, but said to be a manifestation of Chenrezig. One day he was circumambulating the stupa, and he saw this this guy also circumambulating, and he said to him, circumambulation is good, but wouldn't it be better to practice Dharma? So the guy was a bit surprised and thought about it and said, oh, he must mean I should be reciting texts. So a little bit later, Dom Tomba was circumambulating the stupa again, and he came across this guy, and he was sitting there, reciting out loud some text, And he again looked at him and said, reciting texts is good, but wouldn't it be better to practice Dharma? So, the guy was a bit surprised again, and he thought about it. He said, oh, I know, he must mean I should be meditating. So then a bit later, Dom Tomba was circumambulating the stupa, and this guy was sitting there meditating like this, And Dom Tomba stopped again and said, excuse me, meditation is good, but wouldn't it be better to practice Dharma? So at this point, the guy was a bit exasperated. He said, practice Dharma. Practice Dharma. What do you mean practice Dharma? And Dom Tomba said, renounce this life. So, so what he meant was, you can circumambulate, and it looks like a spiritual practice. And of course, because of the power of the object, I always think of Bodhinath Stupa in Kathmandu, which is, one of the most powerful and famous stupas in the world, and has a wide circumambulation path. And especially in the evening, the Tibetans, when there's no pandemic, circumambulate in large numbers, and it's kind of a social occasion, the people are there, we see them at Kurukulla too. The old Tibetans come, mainly the old ones. Where's my mother? Looking for my mother. They're circumambulating, going on mani pemi hum, circumambulating, but they're chatting away, and they go down there to meet their friends, and it's after work, so it's a bit of a social occasion. So you wonder, is the motivation to be circumambulating really to attain enlightenment, for the sake of all sentient beings, or you go down there to have a bit of a gossip with your friends, So there's a question, not sure. Can't see anyone else's mind, but Dom Tomba could see this guy, so maybe he thought this guy is not circumambulating with bodhicitta motivation, but maybe to see and be seen. Who knows? So he said, wouldn't it be better to practice Dharma instead of walking around the stupa with the worldly motivation? Renounce this life. So then reciting texts, if you go to Bodha, the stupa or other stupas, Swayambhu and different stupas in, I'm sure in Tibet also, and you'll often see monks there, or lay people, with their peche in front of them, reciting texts, and their hat, they're like they're busking, hoping for offerings and donations. So then, of course, you can't practice bodhicitta if you don't have the means of living. So they can be reciting a text with bodhicitta, and by the way, collecting little money so they'll live until the next day where they can do it again. Or, some people may just see it as easy money, and they go down there and they recite these texts, mind somewhere else, and there's no bodhicitta. Again, I can't judge, but it's possible. So Dom Tomba saw this guy, reciting texts, and, he said that wouldn't be better to practice Dharma. And then meditation, you see sometimes at the Kopan courses, you'd see there'd be new students would come and they hadn't meditated, but before, but they kind of got into it. And some of them could sit like, especially those who'd done yoga, they could sit in the full lotus position, which a lot of people couldn't do, couldn't get their legs up into that, and they'd be sitting up there very straight and correctly in the full lotus position, and they'd be looking around, seeing if anybody's looking at them, watching, seeing how great their meditation position, and thinking, oh, I hope they're thinking I'm a good meditator, That's what's going in the mind, I hope people are looking at me thinking what a great meditator I am, I haven't done this before, but look how naturally it comes to me. So not creating any merit at all. So again, Don Tomba saw this guy sitting there like that. Maybe he had a hat in front of him with, hoping for donations. You also see that around the stupas, Bodha and Swayambhu and so on in Nepal. People sitting there meditating with a begging bowl in front of them, hoping people will throw a few rupees in. So is the motivation to reach enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings, or to collect money? Not sure. So again, Don Tomba said, wouldn't it be better to practice Dharma? So practice Dharma is to, whatever we do, at least don't do it with a worldly motivation, for reputation or for material gain. I was going to say something else, but I've forgotten.
Could you expand on the meditation on death and the resultant renunciation?
Which meditation on death?
Any meditation on death.
There's a lot of
any meditation on the certainty of death that results in renunciation.
Well, according to the way the lamrim's set up, the meditation on death comes after we've meditated on the perfect human rebirth and really gained some insight into how rare and precious it is, how much we can do with it, how it's useful to gain temporal results, how it's useful to gain ultimate results, and how we can make every moment of perfect human rebirth highly meaningful by practicing bodhicitta and come closer and closer to enlightenment in every moment. So, and then we meditate, how few perfect human rebirths there are with the 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses, and how hard it is how hard it will be to receive again, because it's so hard to create the causes of each of those 18 attributes, the perfect human rebirth. So all that perfect human rebirth package really makes us feel that we're extremely fortunate to have received this perfect human rebirth. But then when we think, how hard it will be to receive again, and then we think about impermanence and death, how even though we have this precious thing, every moment we're getting closer and closer to death. We're going to die, and we don't even know when. It could be in the next moment, So that's thought is to want to make us practice Dharma, and through the 9-round meditation on death, we have these 3 conclusions that I must practice Dharma. I must practice only Dharma, and I must practice Dharma from now on, right now. So those are the three conclusions that we come to through meditating on death. But that in itself doesn't necessarily lead to renunciation. It's what comes after that. You know, why we should be afraid of death is not so much that it means the end of this precious opportunity. We should be afraid of that, but what we should be more afraid of is what comes next. And so that's the next meditation after the meditation on death, is a meditation on the three lower realms. Because understanding that we haven't practiced enough Dharma to free ourselves from all our negative karma and negative tendencies that we've been building up since beginningless time, you know, even if we've been practicing quite well for the last 5, 10, 15 years, we're still completely full of negative minds and negative habits and causes for lower rebirths. We haven't done enough purification, so that's why we should be afraid of death. And you know, when we meditate on the three lower realms, in order to really sort of solidify, I had to say solidify or cement, but for impermanent phenomena, but just to really make ourselves understand that if I were to die right now, and there's no logical reason why I shouldn't, I'm going to definitely be reborn in the lower realms. And it's going to be unbelievable suffering. You know, I think this is bad, you know. You wait till you get back down there, you know, and then very hard to escape from the lower realms, and we'll be there for a long time and impossible really to help others in the lower realms. So it's, you know, bad however you slice it. So then comes, when we have a strong feeling for that I've got this perfect human rebirth, it's going to end any moment, and when it does, I'm going to be reborn in the terrible lower realms. What can I do to save myself from this dangerous situation? Then comes the teaching, the meditation on refuge. So then we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And what's the obligation of that? The first obligation is to follow the law of karma, to stop creating negative karma, to purify negative karma already created, and to create only positive karma, so that we at least have a chance of not being reborn in the upper realms and being reborn, and a better chance of being reborn in the upper realms, ideally having a perfect human rebirth, again, where we can continue our practice of Dharma, since we're not likely to complete the path in this life. So then so that's the end of the path of the lower capable being, the practitioner of least capability. But then we think, well, you know, okay, being reborn again in the upper realms is fine, but like this life, I'm born in the upper realms, but you know, I still create a lot of negative karma. I'm still not free from suffering, and I'm going to die and probably be reborn in the lower realms. So even attaining a better future rebirth isn't much of an end in itself. What I really need to do is escape from cyclic existence altogether. So that's the path of the practitioner of intermediate capacity or capability. So it's really there that we develop renunciation, because in the lower path, we're just trying not to be reborn in the lower realms. And the death meditation is just part of that process. But it doesn't itself lead to renunciation the way that Dom Tombo is talking about. You know, wouldn't it be better to practice Dharma? Where we develop renunciation is really in the intermediate path, where we renounce even the happiness, the temporal happiness, the happiness of cyclic existence, because getting addicted to samsaric happiness, what the lamas call the perfections of samsara, all the good things in life, which are free, that's not enough. We can't, we have to renounce happiness and pleasure by seeing it as suffering in disguise, honey on a razor blade. It's not real happiness. It doesn't last, and it just and it's not actual happiness. It's just less suffering. So it's that understanding, that perception that leads us to want to renounce cyclic existence and then attain liberation. So the meditations on death themselves don't lead directly to renunciation. It's kind of spur us on to further practices, which eventually would lead to renunciation. And then, when we have renunciation, that's just the first of the three principal aspects of the path. Then renunciation, if we have renunciation, that I don't want anything to do with samsara anymore. How do I get out? Well, the only way to get out is to realize emptiness. And the only way to realize emptiness is to meditate on it with single-pointed concentration. So after renunciation, then we have to hone our meditation skills and develop single-pointed concentration. That's the only way to, cut through what Lama Yeshe used to call the heavy blanket of ignorance. This, I think of it as heavy wet blanket. It's even heavier. So we have to be able to slice through it with this perfect concentration, and then we use that perfect concentration, which itself brings with it many advantages and feelings of bliss and joy, which again themselves can be addictive unless we really have strong renunciation and realize even the bliss and joy we get from developing single-pointed concentration while in samsara, they're not ends in themselves, and they're just distractions if we get sucked in by those unbelievable feelings of rapturous ecstasy and so forth, which sound very enticing, but are again, suffering in disguise. So then we study the teachings on emptiness, and we get, correct conceptual understanding of emptiness. And then by meditating single-pointedly on the right understanding of emptiness, we can eventually sort of break through and get a flash of insight, but it's gone, then it's gone. So we have to, analyze the nature of phenomena again to see that they're non-self-existent, and so on and so forth, and then eventually come to a clear understanding that the things don't exist the way we perceive them to, and then again meditate single-pointedly on that, and maybe get a slightly longer glimpse of emptiness. So gradually extending it over by repeating these meditations over and over again. So, sounds like work. Probably is. I don't know any of this from experience, just from what I've heard. But, that's the only way out. And then, of course, then when we get further and further along the path, but we have to remember we can do this for ourselves or we can do it for others. And the only really worthwhile reason is to do it for others, not just for ourselves, to do our to develop renunciation and single point concentration and realization of emptiness with bodhicitta. Make all these practices Mahayana practices, as keeping in mind the ultimate goal, the enlightenment of all sentient beings. What do you think, Bill?
Yes. The reason I said death is that it seems to me that the first goad is the along with the precious life is the certainty of death, and that without that goad, you could be content with simply having whatever time or life that you have currently. But when you have the certainty of death, even as annihilation, you have the first goad to go beyond that, and then all of the process that you outlined is what ensues. But how do I know that I have achieved renunciation? How do I know that I have reached the state of renunciation? What is manifest that says I am a renunciate and somebody else is not a renunciant? I mean, I guess you don't know whether somebody else is, but how do I know that I've achieved renunciation?
Well, as Lama Tsongkhapa says in The Foundation of All Good Qualities, also in this book, commentary by Khunu Lama Rinpoche, understanding precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, great, meaningful, difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. So that's part of understanding perfect human rebirth, that understanding how hard it is to find, it says found only once, which is not literal, but interpretive, and day and night takes its essence. Then remembering life is impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. So, this renunciation is built on these previous understandings. So without the understanding of perfect human rebirth, where day and night you want to take its essence, and without understanding very clearly and deeply that after death, like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white, or negative and positive karma follow. Then finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. So, that how definite karma is. Then seeking samsaric pleasures, now renunciation. Seeking samsaric pleasures, the door to all suffering, the uncertain cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. So if that wish is in you day and night, that all you can think of, you have no interest in any kind of samsaric activity. You only want to meditate, only want to you want to generate the unceasing wish for the bliss of liberation. So that's how you know. You just, you don't need to someone to explain, oh yeah, okay, now you've got renunciation. You will know in yourself when you have it, because your understanding of all these previous teachings is so clear and so deep, and so and you have all these preceding realizations. you just know. You know.
Excuse me, Nick, in Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 principal aspects of the path, there's a very pith explanation. It says, when not even an instant of admiration arises for the prosperities of cyclic existence,
Right.
and when the thought aspiring for liberation arises day and night, at this point, true renunciation has arisen.
Yes, exactly. So you know in yourself if you've attained that level of mind or not. You'll know, then you can tell us.
And we would know that because of wanting to practice Dharma day and night rather than something else.
Yes, I mean, you know, we in the early days. Well, I shouldn't say early days so much, but it's kind of what I remember more. When we first met Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he basically didn't sleep. And it's said that in his previous life as a Laudo Lama, for the last 20 years of his previous life, he'd passed beyond the need for sleep. He just sit in his cave, meditate all day, and maybe, you know, eat once a day, some tsampa. You know, he was a married Lama, he had a family. He had this cave, and just next door there was a house with a kitchen where his family lived. But he stayed in his room meditating day and night for the last 20 years of his life. Maybe coming out once a day to go to the bathroom, that was it. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche mind is the continuity of that one. And you know, and he was kind of the epitome of renunciate to the general appearance. You know, he had no interest in food. He kept his monastic vows, as far as we could tell, impeccably. You know, he always dressed very correctly according to the Vinaya. You know, the rules for the monks, and he stayed in his room at Kopan. Nearly, he'd come out to teach, and he'd go back there, and he had this prayer book called the Laminaljo Guru Yoga, and it had all different sadhanas in it. And he just used to. It was on the table in front, next to his bed. He never lay down. I mean, all the first decades, I knew him from the 70s, 80s, 90s. I only ever saw him lie down once, and that was for 3 days in 1973 or 1974, when he was had a high fever, and he was quite sick, just for 2 or 3 days. Then he lay down. Otherwise, he didn't lie down. I remember on his first trips to Australia with Lama Yeshe, 74, 75, 76, not sure, 77, they stayed at my mother's house, and she was always marveling how she'd make up this bed, and they'd stay there for a week or 2 weeks, and when they left, his bed it's just remained exactly made as she'd made it. You know, she was, I don't know whether she thought he actually slept in it and then made it again, or just, anyway. I think she knew that he didn't even lie down, let alone get under the covers. So one time I was walking with him at Kopan, and you know, when you ask him about his practice, or his realizations or something like that. I mean, normally you wouldn't, because you knew you'd never get a straight answer, or he'd kind of just give you sort of this weird look, or, you know, so that's an inappropriate thing to ask me. So, you know, he didn't. But then one day we were walking along, I actually said to him, you know, how is it that you don't need to sleep? And I expected some kind of, you know, dismissive reply. And but he said, oh, when you realize how meaningful the perfect human rebirth is, you don't find time for sleep. Mm-hmm. So he didn't say he had that realization, but he put it that way, sort of as a theoretical. When you realize how meaningful perfect human rebirth is, you don't find time for sleep. So you have such burning energy inside of you that you see, sleep is this unbelievable waste of time when you could be deepening your understanding and realizations. Of course, there's a way to make sleep, you know, for those of us who need to sleep, there's a way to make it like a Dharma practice, you know, at least motivate, say, now I'm going to sleep for the benefit of sentient beings. I mean, some thought, even some little thought like that can transform sleep from sort of, you know, Lama Yeshe used to call normal sleep, sleeping like a cow. I don't know quite where that comes from. And I think cows sleep standing up, but then people go to the fields and push them over. Was that like a American college prank or something?
Cow tipping.
Cow tipping. Okay, so you know, I mean, maybe you're so deeply unconsciously asleep that even if you tipped over and fall over, you don't wake up. I don't know if Lama was referring to that, or just this kind of, oh, I'm so tired. God, I wish. You just like drop like a stone into bed, completely mindless, you know, just, and then go unconscious. And then all the delusions come up and run rampant through your mind for the next 8 hours. So, you know, there is a way to make sleep positive, like a Dharma practice, but beyond that, it's better not to sleep. In fact, Lama Zopa once gave me a mantra to sleep less, to have less sleep, to need less sleep. So you recite this mantra. When you go to bed, you recite this mantra 7 times, then you have a glass of water. So you recite the mantra, then you blow on the water, and then you take a few sips of water. And then, you know, if you develop this practice, then you can cut back on your sleep. You know, maybe get 3-4 hours is maybe enough, and the rest of the night you can spend in Dharma practice.
Mm-hmm. That's what 6-session yoga is about.
Well, I did that for a couple of days, but then I decided I prefer sleep. But I still have the mantra if anyone's interested. Yes, so, you know, there are different practices we can do. But so all that, you know, that not needing, that's, you know, if we have renunciation, you'll pass beyond the need for sleep. So you'll also know that way that you don't need any sleep, or you only need 1 or 2 hours. And the rest of the time you spend practicing Dharma, you know, meditating on suffering, on developing concentration, on developing bodhicitta, you know, whatever your current practice is. You spend more time on that. Okay, let's just get back to this, wherever we are. Yeah, on the other hand, we may engage in what appears to be spiritual practice, but without the right kind of motivation, it's nothing more than a worldly activity. So that was what Don Tomba was pointing to this guy who was circumambulating. Well, I think it was doing prostrations. Anyway, whether it's circumambulating or prostrating or reciting texts or meditating, you know, if it can be done with a worldly motivation, you know. You know, there was one monk at Bodh Gaya at the Stupa. I don't know how I haven't been there for a long time, but there used to be these prostration boards. You know what a prostration board is? It's like a oblong surfboard, except it probably wouldn't float. And people do prostrations there in front of the Stupa, and full-length prostrations. And you have little pads that you slide your hands on, and anyways, the whole thing. So there's all these people lined up, Westerners, Tibetans, others, doing prostrations in front of the Stupa. There was one monk who could do twice as many prostrations as anybody else. He was quite short. He was only about 5 foot. So I think it made it a little bit easier. But so he would be doing, and, you know, he could do 100,000 prostrations in a month, you know. So he was, you know, he was very proud. He was the king of prostrations, you know. So you kind of wonder, you know, what's his motivation? Is it like to impress people with how many prostrations he does, or is it actually to, you know, create merit to reach enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings? So it's, you know, especially prostrating in public with a lot of people, you think, oh, people are watching me. I'm doing these amazing prostrations. Look how fast I am. You know, I'm much faster than these other guys, you know. It's like, I don't know. Maybe create more merit sitting in the chai shop. All over the world, people dedicate their lives to helping others. They do. They work to alleviate disease, distress, and poverty, and try to provide basic necessities and amenities. Their dedication is a great source of joy and inspiration. If they do this work out of genuine love and compassion for all living beings, it becomes the ineffable practice of bodhisattvas. What does ineffable mean? Somebody? Someone's
I
looking.
think it means you can't describe it with words.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
It becomes the ineffable practice of bodhisattvas. Not all kind-heartedness is the altruistic intention which encompasses the good of all living beings without exception. It's important. So, you know, it's possible to do these things with worldly motivation as well. So it's important to understand the true magnitude of this intention and the vast reach of a bodhisattva's concern. Even if we possess this altruistic intention, what we can do for others in practice is necessarily limited by our physical and mental resources and stamina. To develop our resources, we train in skillful means and wisdom through practice of the 6 perfections, availing ourselves of the methods explained in both Sutra and Tantra. Whether we do a short or long daily practice, it should comprise the complete path to enlightenment. Then, even if we fail to develop great realizations, we will at least establish valuable imprints. Through a partial path of practice, though a partial path of practice may be useful, it cannot lead to complete enlightenment. A car will only get us to our destination if all its parts are in good working order. If vital parts are missing, we won't get far. The altruistic intention cannot arise, bodhicitta cannot arise, until we have great compassion. At the beginning of his supplement to the middle way, Madhyamaka Avatara, Chandrakirti praises compassion for its importance at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. He says, compassion alone is seen as the seed of a victorious one's rich harvest, of a Buddha's rich harvest, as water for its growth and as its ripening into a source of usefulness. And so first I pay homage to compassion. Compassion, it's the seed, it's the water for its growth, and it's for ripening. So beginning, middle, and end. Initially, compassion is indispensable because it gives us the impetus to develop the altruistic intention, bodhicitta. Intermediately, it gives us the strength to persevere in practicing the paths that lead to enlightenment. Finally, their compassion makes enlightened beings continuously turn the wheel of the teaching for the benefit of living creatures. So we go through these long and difficult practices, 3 principal aspects of the path, 3 levels of the path, the 6 perfections, the realization of emptiness, all these practices done with bodhicitta, and eventually we reach enlightenment, the ultimate goal, and we think, oh, thank God, I've got all that behind me. Now I can relax. No. Then for the rest of time, we have to work for the enlightenment of all sentient beings because we were motivated by bodhicitta. So that, just as renunciation is the energy that gets an arhat to liberation, where they can remain in the, blissful state of peace for eons, coasting on that energy, powerful energy of renunciation and perfect concentration, until eventually they have to then enter the Mahayana path. Similarly, like a bodhisattva who reaches enlightenment. So all the difficult practices, all the hard meditations are over and done with. But then the power of bodhicitta obliges the Buddha to keep working for the enlightenment of sentient beings. Of course, it's not a burden, it's a joy. But, the work doesn't finish upon reaching enlightenment. In a way, it's only just beginning. But, that shouldn't put us off. Initially, what am I saying? Yeah. Finally, after concisely delineating the 3 levels of ability, the paths of the lower, intermediate, and great capable beings, Atisha now promises to explain the paths to enlightenment. He describes the paths connected with the perfection vehicle in some detail and deals only briefly with the paths of secret mantra or the Vajra vehicle. So in the 6th verse, he says, for those excellent living beings who desire supreme enlightenment, I shall explain the perfect methods taught by the spiritual teachers. So we'll pick that up next week. Any questions? Okay, so we began by generating bodhicitta, and we continued throughout the session of discussing, these Atisha's teaching and the commentaries by Khunu Lama, His Holiness, and Geshe Sonam Rinchen. So definitely the beginning and the middle, we create a lot of merit. So now we want to dedicate that merit. We want to complete the action, we want to seal the action with the 3rd thing, which is dedication of the merit. So we dedicate the merit to, the long, healthy lives of our teachers, that may they continue teaching until all sentient beings are enlightened, and may these teachings spread infinitely throughout all of space, and may all sentient beings quickly reach enlightenment. So that's the idea of the dedication prayers. So someone's going to lead us in those.
Saji perki jukshin mitokran riratling jimi degen pade sange jingdu mikte urwagi dokun namdak jing lacher parshu Jitsun lame kutse rapten ching nam katrin le chok shurgi padang lo sang ten pedrin me sasum ki droe munsel taktunig yurchig yidam guru ratna mandalakam niryatayami. From my two collections, vast is space that I have amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time. May I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom Maya is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all my lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by practicing. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discern them. May I uphold the Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by even this graded course to enlightenment completed due to the wondrous, virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their children. May all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and make things conducive for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes an effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may they always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. In that snow mountain encircled land, source of every benefit and joy, may Lord Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezig remain in life till samsara's end. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings who extensively clarifies the path that unifies emptiness and compassion. To the lotus in the hand, Lord Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Through this virtue may I swiftly, having gained Guru Buddha state, place each and every sentient being without exception in that state. Precious supreme Bodhi mind, may it where unborn arise, and where born never decline, but increase forevermore. Migmate se waiter chen chen rezi, remake yen pei, wang po jang pel yang, gang chen ke pei, su gen song kappa, lo sang rang pei, Jabla Solwade. Thank you, Nick.
Okay, thanks everybody. So remember the Bodhisattva vow and Chandra Gomin's text on the Bodhisattva vows by Geshe Sonam Rinchen and Venerable Gyatso's mind and ourselves with Buddhist psychology. So that's on lamayeshi.com. And then the wisdom books, Bodhicitta, Six Perfections, and Patience, the Bodhisattva practices by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So read all them. There'll be a quiz next week.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Dr. Nick.
Thank you, Nick.